You are listening to the Techie Leadership Show with Bogdan and Andrei.
Hello and welcome to the Techie Leadership Show. Today with me I have Duane Cummings. He likes to find the uncommon where others see the common by filtering in versus filtering out. Duane is honored to be known as a servant leader who continues to flip the organizational chart and defines CEO as constantly elevating others. And that's a great definition. I love it. He focuses on making the world a better place by serving others. His aim is to die empty by sharing his gifts and talents to help people turn challenges into opportunities, gain clarity, and begin living life on their own terms. He learned the importance of teamwork and leadership skills while he was in his early life and also then while serving in the US Army. All that work later provided championships as a professional soccer player and coach. After retiring from athletics, he transitions to the business world and held several executive and management positions before launching his own startup wholesale clothing line, the Duke and Duchess Company. Over the last 15 years, he joined forces as partners in or owner of companies in a variety of industries and has been asked to lead numerous unique projects. Hi, Duane, and welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks, Andrei. I appreciate it. I'm grateful and humbled to be here.
Oh, I appreciate a lot you being on the show. And with all your experience, I'm really curious because you served in the US Army and then you went into professional athletics and being a soccer player and a coach. And then you transitioned in the business world. So that's a lot of stuff. A lot of leadership evolves in those arenas.
Yeah, I like to say you learn how to make a lot of mistakes. So, yeah,
yes.
But hopefully you learn from those mistakes. So, yes.
And that's the whole goal of mistakes, is to learn stuff and become better. It's not, oh, I made a mistake, I'm not good at it, just stop it here.
Right. So many people are timid and fearful of making a mistake, and leaders don't allow for people to make mistakes. So it's real tough to grow if you don't make mistakes. You know, there are certain mistakes you can't afford to make, but most mistakes you can afford to make and you can recover from.
Exactly. And it's you should encourage your people at least to do small mistakes so they can grow, and you can see them as training wheels. Sometimes the training wheels, which are like will touch the ground, but that's how they learn to pedal, and you build an organization that you can have faith in them, that they can do stuff, and you can go on vacations actually.
Right. And kind of a byproduct of mistakes that some people forget about is you find out how passionate somebody truly is about something. Because if they make a mistake and they just give up on it, they probably didn't really have passion or care about that. But if they make a mistake and they double down and work twice as hard, then you know their heart is there and their passion is there.
So basically mistakes, you can see them as an indicator of passion. Never thought about that way.
Oh, yeah, I truly believe it. And that's why some people call them a test, right? So let me put you to the test, but I don't even look at it like that. It's more benign than that. If somebody makes a mistake and then they pick themselves up and try even harder, they really care. They have, passion, or, they really want to get something accomplished.
Oh, yes. And thank you for sharing that insight, because I never thought about it like that. And now I hope that this small conversation actually would embolden people to, one, they themselves take more risks and make more mistakes, especially if they're not the fatal kind, and also embolden their own teammates to also take risks, because that's how everybody grows.
That's right. Yeah, I liken it to eating different foods, right? So if you try a food from another culture, another country, and you don't really like it, it's okay. You don't have to eat it again, but at least you have knowledge. But if you love it, now you just found out something that's new to you that you can be passionate about. And so in business and with leaders, you definitely need to let your team try things that they might not succeed at. Most people want to hedge their bets and win every time, but I think there's more to be gained if you don't know the outcome every time. So,
and that's such a powerful analogy, at least for me, because I am a foodie, And I like when visiting a country to try all the local foods at least once to see if I find something new, something that I can use, and maybe even inspire my own cooking at home. And I find it a little sad because I have friends and I've known people that they go to another country and they look for restaurants like back home, like their own ethnic restaurants, never stepping out to try something different, which
Wow.
I
Yeah.
believe it's a shame.
Yeah. And if you liken that to business, then those are the type of people that are, whenever there's a challenge in your company, they're probably going to be the ones to first say, well, we've always done it this way, or this
Yes.
worked last time. And so when you find and face new challenges, they are probably not going to be the ones to come up with new answers because they haven't explored or they haven't stretched themselves. So there's a correlation to a lot of the way people live their personal life as to how they're going to show up in your company.
For sure. And Duane, I'm really curious because you have such a rich experience professionally. I'm really curious about your stories. So, what would be the biggest leadership success story you've witnessed personally?
Wow. Well, I've been very blessed. When I was the CEO at LeaderCast, I got to work around, Nobel Peace Prize winners like Malala Yousafzai and people like that. But um, I I actually think it has to do with a guy that was the founder of EFS, which is the oil and gas company that I was involved in, and I became the COO of. And I would say that it was because he walked the talk, meaning he embodied or he demonstrated all the things that I believe a great leader should demonstrate. And to give you an example, this is an oil and
Okay.
gas company, and so there are oil facilities all over North America that we owned and ran, and
Yes.
he would show up because they're going on 24 hours a day. He would show up, or we would be together. He would go somewhere at maybe 2 a.m. at a very remote site where there was no one really around except for the workers that are on that site. And he would never get out of the car and say, like, here I am, I'm the owner. In fact, most people didn't even know he was the owner. He would show up and ask,
Wow.
oh yeah, he would show up and ask how people were, and he would always have extra drinks and snacks and things for people. And so if they said, well, we haven't had a chance to take a break, he'd just give it to them. If there was trash around the site, he wouldn't berate people. He would just grab a trash bag and start picking up trash and that kind of thing. And so then we would consequently leave, and people would be like, well, who is that? Who is that guy? And they would go and
Yeah.
look at the sign. Yeah, they would go and look at the sign-in sheet at the security checkpoint, and they would realize that the person that signs their check every week was that guy, right? And so
Wow.
very humble and servant mindset, which are the two, for me, a great leader and leadership success comes around to being humble and having a servant mindset. And he embodied both of those. So yeah, Mark Snodgrass, I've actually written about him, good friend. And he just, he's the leader, but he never has to say it, if that makes sense.
Yes. And that's when you are a leader, when you don't have to start every conversation, I am the CEO of the company and here I am. Actually, and what Mark did, I find it like one of the goals you will want to achieve as a leader, going to an offsite or a different office or where people actually would report to you, but you go there and they don't know what your rank is and how, and just through your presence and your care and your servant attitude, they work with you and they respond to you in a way that actually recognizes the fact that you're a leader. And then afterwards they find out about your title, and I think that's more empowering for you as a leader, and also for them, because they realize, "Hey, I'm not working for a snob, and he's a relatable person, and yeah, it's cool to be in this company because of the kind of leadership we have."
Yeah, he definitely, after those kind of interactions and then word would spread, he garnered a sense of loyalty and open communication that was great, amazing, because then the next time he would come around, they would say, "Oh, you kind of tricked us." He said, "No, I'm just here to serve. I'm just here to help you do a good job." And he would listen, and if they had complaints or concerns, he would definitely address them. So yeah, he's probably in person. I mean, I've seen people at arm's reach, like I said, or like a Desmond Tutu or people like that, but in person, right side by side, shoulder by shoulder, definitely the biggest leadership success story. Yeah.
Yeah. And could you give out other example of benefits of leading in this way? Like what other results did he get, like that you were like surprised?
Um, well, yeah, I wasn't as surprised as I was gratified and happy to see that type of leadership style works. So I mentioned loyalty, open
Yes.
communication and dialogue. So when he would arrive and people wouldn't know who he was, maybe somebody would start complaining about something, and he would say, "Well, that's a fair complaint. Maybe we should talk to somebody about that. Maybe we should address this." And then he would kind of ask, and you're sure you're doing your job right? You're being safe and you're doing all these things, because if that's the case, then we really need to support you better. And he was, he was a great listener. And so then when they found out later that he was willing to listen to them, then of course they are always willing to listen to you. And because he was
Yes.
out there, at 2 a.m. or on a weekend, when most people that are in executive or ownership positions are at home or on their boat or relaxing, he would take the time to go out in those times. And so then people knew that he really did care. It wasn't like he showed up between normal business operating hours, came out there, waved, took a picture and left. He was really, really involved in their life. So, yeah, I think the derivatives are all of those people at that point started to begin to feel like they were owners. Instead of being workers, they were working they took ownership because they knew that their owner cared. So that's a real great byproduct of servant leadership and demonstrating those type of things.
Wow. And if you can inspire your people to feel like they're owners, that really creates a powerful company. And I'm sure that the company that Mark led was really successful.
It was one of the fastest growing and scaling companies that I've ever seen. And yes, we sold to a publicly traded company within a couple of years. But yeah, I think you really just have to demonstrate, which is what he did. And then, people will surprise you. And you used the word inspire a moment ago. I love
Yes.
that word versus motivation, because most leaders, they have that carrot and the stick or the whip, and they're talking about pay raises and maybe bonuses, or I'm going to lay you off or fire you. So there's always that
Oh my
fear
God.
element. Yeah. And inspiration is, to breathe into. And so when you
Yes.
breathe life into somebody else and inspire them by your works or by sharing the works of others, they will do the right thing even when you're not there. And that's what really ended up
Exactly.
happening. So when he was gone and he was in another state or back at the home office, he had no worry that somebody in the middle of nowhere at 2 a.m. was going to do the right thing, because he had already demonstrated what doing the right thing was. They were inspired.
Yes, because he walked the talk. So he's not
That's right.
just bragging. Oh my God, there's nothing more discouraging, at least in my opinion, for a team or a workforce, whatever you want to call it, than to have leaders always declaring all kinds of stuff, and you can see that the next moment they themselves they break their own words.
Right. Yeah, and that's probably athletics helped me with that, because if you're ever going to be a captain or something like that, you take on more responsibility. And I always used to say coaches lose games and players win games, because if you do it right, you praise them for success, and then you take the responsibility in public for not winning. But then in private, you have honest, challenging, tough conversations with your team. But I think great leaders should be doing the same thing. You always create an environment where your people feel safe with your leadership.
And how did athletics change your leadership mindset?
Well, in multiple ways. So I kind of look at sometimes that I grew my leadership initially through athletics, because I was a player early on, but then I had several injuries. So I got into coaching earlier than most people do, earlier in my career. But I was
Okay.
still young and naive. And I had a lot to learn.
We
I
all
still,
we all were sometimes. So
yeah. And I would like to say that I'm still naive. I don't know that I'm so young anymore, but yeah, so athletics, because there's a finite goal every time, whether it's to win a game or win a championship or whatever, unlike a company, which has an infinite goal, right? Sustain and keep making
yes,
profits and keep growing. With athletics, there's always a finite goal. And so you're always being measured, and your leadership, is a reflection of those results, or those results are a reflection of your leadership. So if you don't get the results you want, and you don't have the leadership skills you need, you are exposed in a hurry,
yes,
so
the feedback loop is really short.
yeah, that's right. So I think that's one of the ways that athletics helped me. And because I was involved in soccer or football, and we had a diverse culture, people from South America, Europe, Africa, North America on the team, you have to learn how to fit different people and personalities together to accomplish a goal. So that those kind of lessons I learned in athletics definitely transferred into the business world instantly. And
Yeah,
everybody has different goals too, right? So some players come in with an individual mindset where they want to be a leading scorer, whatever, but they have to fit into the team goal. And you have to do a great job of explaining as a coach what your role is, how it impacts the team, and why every person's role is important for us to achieve the outcome we're looking for. So that's the same thing in a corporation.
and Dwayne, because now the workplaces are becoming more international, you can have colleagues from all over the world, or offices that you have to work with them and on the same project. It is in a way like on a team. So I'm really curious, what did you do to bridge the cultural differences between the different team players to make them work together?
Well, it's interesting, and this is a friend of mine is named Ricardo Gonzalez. He's the founder of Bilingual America. He wrote a book called The 6 Stages of Cultural Mastery, and I've been friends with him for a
Okay.
long time, and I was there with him during that journey of writing the book. And it was really interesting because before he wrote the book, I kind of found out that I was doing some of these things without even knowing they were important. So one of
Awesome.
them, yeah, so I felt very fortunate. So one of them was education. So the more you can learn about someone else, the more you can be empathetic to them, or have empathy, which is another one of those things. And you can put yourself in their shoes. So some things you can't do. Like, I've been married 32 years. We have 2 sons. I can feel for my wife, but I can never truly understand what it was like to be pregnant. But
Yes.
I can carry around 30 extra pounds on my front or something like that to try to get as close to that as I can. So educating about life in Africa, life in Asia, life in South America, life in Europe, whatever, that then I can kind of start putting my self in those people's position. But on our team, we would have just as much time off the field learning about each other as we did on. So learning about what people value, what their beliefs are, what inspires them. We shared different foods from different cultures, and then not only the food, but why that food. In some places they're eating very bland food because that's all that was available to them, right? Or poor cuts of meat because they can't afford to go get, like here in America where you can get anything you want.
Yes.
Certain cultures, how they are loyal and listen to their elders. They have a different level of reference for their elders. So perhaps their grandparents or even great grandparents stay in their home with the family until they pass. That's not always the same for everybody else. So really getting to understand, educate, being empathetic, that allowed us to begin to endear each other, to each other. And so then you really care about that person because you know what makes them tick, and you know what goals they have and what dreams they have, and you know what they're passionate about. And so when you start understanding in that depth, you can make a difference. Now, in some corporations, it's tough because there's this separation of this is my business life and that's my personal life. And, please don't ask me any questions or stay out of my
Yes.
business. But you definitely need to find some common ground and understand what's driving those other people so that you can figure out how to serve them well, Yeah.
Uh, And it sounds like by learning so much about different cultures and different people, you yourself improved on your view on the world.
Yeah, because then you can begin to be a bridge builder. So as a leader, that's your job, right? Is you're always building bridges. Some people call things networking or connecting or putting teams together or leading an organization, but you're just building bridges. And the if you build a bridge on a side or a foundation that's not solid, it will inevitably crumble. So your job is always to search in others what's solid and what's going to be there and kind of what's at their core. So then you can make those solid bridges or connections.
Yes, and it's important. That's one of the major roles that you have as a leader. And with that in mind, Duane, let's switch a little gears. And I'm really curious, what is the biggest leadership failure you had the unfortunate experience of witnessing?
Ooh. So if we're being totally transparent and honest, we could easily point out in others failures, right? Whether they're
Yes.
corporate failures, whether they're political failures, whatever it is, we could point those things out. But I would rather kind of turn that light on myself. Now, for one, I actually usually don't use the word fail. It's almost hard for me to say. It's like the F word that I don't like to say. um, but because there's so much negative stigmatism attached to that word, right? So if a child fails in
Yes.
school, then it changes who they are and their trajectory. But I have made some huge mistakes. And so my biggest leadership, huge mistake, it kind of dovetails with what you asked earlier about what did I learn as a coach through athletics. So when I
Okay.
became the head coach and general manager of a professional team, I had actually played with many of those players. And so I kind of had biases. And I
Okay.
was and I was insecure because now I'm a young guy, but I'm in a position, and I was still young in my mind and my leadership mind where I thought title is what made you a leader. And I thought, I have to control and show everybody else that I have all the answers and I'm the boss, which was a horrible mistake. And I actually released two players in the middle of the season who went to play for another team. And to make a long story short, they beat us in overtime, in extra time, in the playoffs. And
Oh,
so they were, of course, they were inspired to come back and show me that I had made a mistake, right?
yes.
And yeah, and in reality, when I faced myself in the mirror, the only reason those players were great players, but I was concerned about them being a disruption in the locker room because they had strong personalities. And I was worried about them not agreeing with me. When in reality, I should have harnessed their energy and they would have helped us win a championship that year. And fortunately, through mentorship and people telling me, things I needed to improve on, I've gone back and I made amends with those guys, and we're friends to this day. One of them I'm real close with, and we talk about different projects all the time, et cetera. And I think some of that had to do with because I admitted that I made a horrible mistake, and people will give you grace and forgive you when they realize that you're sincere. You don't have,
Yes.
an agenda. You just grew as a person and you learn because we all make mistakes. So yeah, the biggest leadership, I'm going to call it a mistake. I know you called it the F word. Just kidding. Fail.
Yes.
Um, but I would say that one helped me grow more than any other. I've made a lot of them, but that one helped me grow more than others.
Um, and I'm really curious because you said like you came in with biases because you used to play with them, and then you
Mm-hmm.
became like the coach. How did that impact like your ability to lead them?
Yeah, that's a very great question because when you're with somebody and you're playing and you're training, what's being said under their breath about the current coach, right? So when we would be
Yes.
practicing together and I was a player, their opinions of the ownership, how they feel about their contract, how they feel about signing autographs for players after a game that we lost, all that. And so, what a great leader will do, which I was not a great leader at the time. I don't know that I still am. I'm working on it. But what a great leader will do is they will create an environment where you can have courageous conversations, and they will talk about the
Uh,
elephant in the room. So what I should have done, looking back on it hindsight, is I should have sat down with those people individually first, so they had a safe place, a safe haven, and said, listen, we've been together as players for a long time, so I know how you feel and how you think. Help me understand how I'm going to be able to serve you well as a coach, a general manager, knowing what I currently know. Like, help me to serve you well, right? Which is what I think leadership is all about. And that's why I said we could pick a lot of other people that have made mistakes, because by my definition, they're not serving the people they lead well. And I could have done that, and I think it would have made a huge difference.
Yes, and that's important, because even if you get, like, you work in a corporate environment and you're really good at your job and you get promoted inside your team to be the manager or the leader of the team, you will also have different biases because you used to do the work with those people. But and you have to do, like, you need to have courageous conversations with them and create an environment where they trust you and they come with you, and show them that you actually want to resolve all the old gripes and all the situations that weren't so pleasant while you were a colleague. So I find this story, like, really important, and it applies not just in sports, it also applies in business and in any situation where a person gets promoted from being like a team member and being like the leader of the team.
Yeah, I think you're right. It is so important. There are so many parallels, by the way. I feel like I've got a leg up on everybody else, or I've had an advantage because I went through sports, because I learned so many important lessons that transferred to business. And, there's very few times where you get promoted. Like when I became a CEO, no one handed me a book that said, this is exactly how you're supposed to be a CEO.
It would be
there were
great if
books
there was a book.
right, a manual for your exact job. And so what you do is you think back to all the CEOs you've ever known, or what you think a CEO should be, and then you start behaving that way. And so if you had great examples, awesome. But if you had poor examples, uh-oh. And so when you get promoted within a team, if you've never seen it, you don't know even how to act. There's not a playbook for it. And if you have seen it, you're probably going to behave the way that you saw, or you're going to behave the exact opposite, because you say, like, I'll never do what that person did. Right. So, yeah.
And you really have to be careful when you get promoted to look at what biases you might have, because especially if you know the team that you're going to lead and you work with them, some people you're going to favor because they were your friends. Some people, there were like a little more competition with them, or you didn't like their work style. And you really have to, as a leader, your job is not to put people down. If you feel like it wasn't you're there, placed there to help them grow and get beyond their own limiting beliefs.
That's exactly right. You said that, so well. We should put that on a T-shirt and hand that out. Yeah, so when you get promoted around your peers, it's so important to go back to them and let them know what your intentions are, and communicate with them, and let them know you are there to help them be better, versus you just got promoted. In fact, great leaders, what they do is they make sure that they know that they have a different area of responsibility or accountability, but they never feel like they're superior. It's everybody has a role. Everybody, right. Everybody, we're all humans. We all have fears, challenges, things we have to get accomplished. My role is just different than yours. My accountability and responsibility is just different than yours. That's all. I'm not more important than you. So the person that answers the phone at a company is just as important. I believe you should make them just as important as the CEO. Now, their role is different, and their day-to-day decisions may or may not impact the company the same way that the CEO does, but they are just as important. Think about it like a car. Is the steering wheel more important than the four tires? No, it's a different, but yet you can't get anywhere without the steering wheel, and you can't get anywhere without tires on the car. So, there are certain things, and by the way, none of the things happen unless somebody puts the key in. So it's not about who's more important. It's just about your responsibility at that time. That's all.
And Duane, based on all your experiences, what would be your leadership philosophy?
Oh, that's pretty easy. I think be humble and be of service. And lastly, the third thing, it's not about me. Meaning, when you're a leader, it should never be about you. You are the conduit. You might be the catalyst. You might be the bowl or the cup that carries something, but it's not about you. When you make your leadership about everyone else around you, you stay humble and you be of service, you'll be a great leader. But that's my philosophy, right? There are places and cultures in the world where leadership is about strength and standing up and being active, and and that's that culture's belief in leadership. So everybody's is different, but I can reconcile my own life and my own leadership journey if I am humble, if I stay of service, and I keep reminding myself it's not about me. Those three things.
In my opinion, being humble, it's a form of strength, and it's actually have to be stronger to be able to be humble, because we all have an ego and we like praises, and it's really easy to fall prey to your ego. It's so easy.
Yeah, being humble, don't mistake that for being weak either, right? Like people that are quiet, don't mistake that for a lack of strength. Just because you're humble doesn't mean you're subservient or you're weak. Being humble means you're acutely aware that other people should be valued and that you shouldn't be valued more than them.
Yeah, well said. And going a little back, because when you were saying the success story, you said like Mark was a great listener, and that was like one of his superpowers. And it's something that I heard like on several interviews I did. Like people say like, listen, if you want to be a good leader, develop your listening skills. So how has impacted being your ability to listen to people, your leadership skills, and the results you got with different teams and different organizations?
I personally think, listening is part of communication, and I think that communication is one of the three key pillars or legs or whatever that all leaders must have. Great communication, and listening is a key to that. So for me in impacting, it's right up there at the top. There were things that when I was a leader early on and I got a title or whatever, I thought in meetings, like for instance, I would need to be the one that people were looking to for answers. So I needed to speak and I needed to talk more and I needed to have the final say. But what I came to realize through teaching or learning and mentorship and that kind of thing is when I speak, it squelches other people's voice. Maybe they don't speak up because they don't think I'm going to appreciate their idea or I don't value them. So, one of the practices that I had as a CEO, for instance, and in many other positions, I would tell the team early on, listen, don't misread what's going to happen in this meeting, but I'm not going to speak. And you can look at my face and you can look for clues, but I'm not doing that because my voice is not the most important voice in this room. You guys all have the skills, the talent to solve this problem. If you need me, I will speak. But otherwise, I'm going to listen. And so we would set that precedent right up front. And, when people are frustrated most of the time in the world, it's because they don't feel like they're being heard. And so if you want to be a great leader, listen to people and not just listen like in one ear and out the other, but, actively listen and really listen to understand and be empathetic, not listen to reply or, listen to argue or for conflict. So yeah, I think it's right up there at the top of the things that helped me in my leadership journey, listening.
And thank you, Duane, so much for sharing like this story and this leadership tip, because it's hard for people to believe that listening would be a key to it. And especially like you're a newly minted leader, you want to show like your title and everything. You have that impulse. It's not like something happens. It's like a switch. I lived through it myself. I don't know why a little ego there working. But the key to succeed is listening.
Yeah, and it's natural. So I just almost stepped on your voice right there.
No problem.
I'm in agreement with you. I'm so passionately in agreement with you. But give yourself some grace, because what happens when you're given something, naturally as humans, we try to validate that receiving that. So if somebody gives you a gift, you try to validate, was I kind enough? Did I deserve this? If you get a promotion, you feel like I got to validate either the title or the more money they're giving me or more authority. And so you feel like you have to up what you're doing. Right. And so what happens with leaders many times is they mistake that for, I have to speak more. I have to be more active. And in reality, less is more in a lot of instances.
Yes.
Right. So great leaders are in those positions because they're getting more out of other people. And the mistake that most leaders make is they think they have to do more. Right. It's a
so
big
well
misnomer. Yeah.
Yeah. And since we're talking about newly minted leaders, what would be your top 3 leadership tips for them?
Top 3 leadership tips. Well, I'll make it easy because somebody long ago taught me these different things at different times in my life, and I just wanted to package them where people could digest it. So first is,
awesome.
I'll give you it's ABC. You know how like as children you learn in your language or whatever, you ABC. Okay. A is for awareness. Right. So as a leader, the first thing you need to be is you need to be aware. And the first thing is you need to be self-aware. So your strengths, your weaknesses, your tendencies, how do you respond under pressure? Are you the first one to talk in a meeting and are you the last one to talk? You know, are you controlling? Those kind of things. And then of course, aware of other people around you. And then when you become, you mentioned superpower earlier, when you become a Jedi or even, a Yoda, is when you are aware, of yourself and others and what's happening between the two, that third level of awareness of how your behavior and how their behavior is creating, that's when you're really in another level, right? So that's the A, awareness. The B is your behavior. So be aware of your behavior, your habits, your tendencies. And here's why. Leadership is demonstrated. We talked earlier about Mark showing up on a job site and picking up trash, et cetera. People are watching to see if your words are congruent with your actions when you're a leader. So your behavior is so important. So if you say you're a leader, but when somebody else is talking, you're looking at your phone or you're rolling your eyes or whatever, you're not behaving that, right? Or if your habit is to not schedule enough time to listen to other people or, whatever it is. So your behavior is real important. That leads to your C, which for me is about communication. So if you want to be a great leader, first of all, be aware, self-aware, aware of others. Monitor your behaviors. What are your habits? What are your tendencies? And then improve your communication. Self-communication, of course, just like awareness, you got to start with how do you talk to yourself? That little voice in your head, before you walk into a meeting, you already start playing out a narrative of how something's going to go and how a conversation's going to go and all that. You got to be careful of that. And then what you're communicating with other people verbally and non-verbally, because if you're not congruent as a leader, everybody knows it. Everybody knows. We all know when we watch a leader that we know, like they really believe what they're saying.
Yes.
Right. we know it 100%. And then we know like that person is just talking and they don't believe a word they say. So work on your communication, which as you mentioned earlier, includes listening. It also includes, nonverbal communication, how you approach people, the respect that you give them, the space that you give them, which is different culturally all around the world. So I think those 3 tips: be aware of your, watch your behaviors and improve your communication.
Exactly. And I love like how you said, like in communication, even like your non-verbal communication is important, because you might not be saying anything, so you're listening, but you might be shouting with your body, especially if you're in a meeting playing on a game. Clearly, it's
right. Well, there are times, and I'll point it out to people when, let's say you really don't have a lot of time as a leader and you're in a hurry and you know that the person has a fair concern, but you don't really have time to listen to them. And so as they begin to tell you, you shuffle your feet and you turn your feet a little bit subconsciously, but you turn your feet towards the door like you're ready to leave. that other person knows what you're doing. They sense that, they feel that. So then they know you're not truly engaged. You're not present. And so what you're communicating to them is, yeah, I'm the leader and what you have to say might be important, but I just don't have time for you right now. That's really what you're communicating.
Oh, yes. And I like how you package them in the ABCs of leadership. So it's
Sometimes
really great.
well, thanks. I've said it for a long time. We are, life and business and sports and all that. It's a simple game played by complex people. So if the game is simple, let's just keep the definitions and the explanation simple. ABC, I mean, we don't have to get to M and N and O. We don't need to go that far. If we become more aware and we adjust our behavior, we communicate better, no matter what level of leader we are, we're going to be way more effective. So, yeah.
Yeah. And since we're talking about the ABCs, let's switch to the reading part. What would be the book that had the most profound impact on you?
Wow. That's a loaded question because I have a pretty good library, and I feel as though I'm fairly well read, and I read books that I might not like, but I read them to learn anyway. And
Awesome.
right. And because if I don't stretch my viewpoint, then how will I ever grow?
Exactly.
But I'm also an author, and one of the books that I read it impacted me in a way that allowed me to believe that I could also tell a story that would be important and through a parable. And I think it's actually,
nice.
I know it is. It's one of your past guests. So,
okay.
Yeah. So Bob Berg wrote a book. He's written several with John David Mann, but he wrote a book called The Go-Giver. And in that, it's an easy parable, simple parable, but it is very profound. And it really matched and aligned with my mentality or my thinking, what I had become as a leader, what I thought was important. So it was an affirmation for me, if that makes sense. And it was also a blueprint for how I was going to write my books. So I write in parable. The only difference is I also include real people and real stories from my life and people that I know in my books. But that book, yeah, thank you. That book probably was, that's the one that's near and dear to my heart. There are others, when I was coaching in college, I would give The Richest Man in Babylon to every graduating senior. That's by George Clason, right? So that they would learn about money and finance. The Greatest Salesman in the World by Og Mandino. Or there are books, As a Man Thinketh, there are value to be found in all kinds of books. But that one probably touches my heart and is the one that's most personal to me. And because Bob is a dear friend, and he is one of the people on this planet that walks his talk.
Yes, Bob is amazing.
Yeah. And so for me, it's another light or a beacon out there that says you can follow a certain path and find success. Yeah.
And Duane, if people want to find out more about you, where should they go?
Well, in this world, you can Google, as long as you spell it Duane. My last name is Cummings, Cummings, and you'll find me. But if you go to my website, DuaneCummings.com, I'm not one of those people that, is pushing out for the mailing list all the time, and I'm not sending you notifications every day and all that. But there's enough information on there you can find. You can link to my YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn.
I'll put the links in.
Yeah, Twitter, all the different platforms on there. And I don't write as often in blog form as I used to, but I still write blogs that go on there, and I create some videos once in a while. So that's probably the easiest way. But the other thing is that, having a social media manager is important when you have lots to handle.
Yes.
But I also respond to every person myself. It might take me a little while to get back to them, but I respond to every person.
That is so gracious of you.
Well, that's kind of you to say, but in reality, I'm no different or better than anyone else. I'm just, maybe I have more connections, let's just say. But otherwise, I breathe in the same air that you're breathing. We have the same kind of blood. We're living the same kind of life. So, and there are 7.5 billion people on the planet. So even if I wanted to meet everybody, the chances are, just with the time restriction, I couldn't. But if somebody's going to take the time to reach out to me, I definitely wouldn't be the right kind of human if I didn't correspond. So,
And Duane, you teased a little about your book, which is in parable form. So to say the title of it, so people sure I want to pick it up.
Well, thank you. The one that's out right now is the Sensational Leader, and since your leadership podcast, it's important. The 7 in this series. The first one was the Sensational Salesman, and sometimes the names are a little bit of a misnomer because the main characters. Yeah, there's 7 books in the series. The main characters travel through all 7 books, learning different lessons. There are real people in these books. So Bob Berg is, in one of the books, but they're standalone. Yeah, they're standalone. So you don't have to read them in order. You don't have to read, the first one and the second one. But it would be like we talked about Yoda earlier. It would be like the Star Wars movies. You could watch the last one first or the first one last or whatever. It wouldn't matter. You can always figure it out. So. Yeah, but
That's
the Sensational
really
Leader, thank you. Fortunately or unfortunately, lots of people have purchased the book, and so there's new copies available still from, Barnes & Noble or Amazon or the publisher, and there's also used copies even on eBay and places. So it should be pretty easy, and there's e-copies, so it should be pretty easy and affordable.
That's good news.
Thank you.
Duane, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a true pleasure having you. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. You're welcome, and thank you very much, Andrei. I mean, I'm proud of what you're doing. You're an amazing leader. Bringing other people's voices is a great leadership trait, and so keep impacting your community in a positive way because it's much needed. And I'm humbled and honored, and it was a privilege to be with you today.
Thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.
That was today's episode. Tune in daily. Rate, like, subscribe, and share, please. Oh, you can find further info and materials in the show notes on techyleadership.com, including links to the guest book recommendations.